Alright, sorry for taking so long. It's the subway. It's the subway's fault. So let me welcome you. Thanks so much for making it during this very busy time, this semester. And let me very briefly introduce our guest poet, Pavel Arseniev, who comes from Petersburg, although right now he lives in Geneva, who is, we happen to be on his way from Brooklyn to Philadelphia, then to Manhattan, then tonight off to New Haven University, where the whole symposium on contemporary poetry is taking place this weekend. And thank you just so much for finding the time to read.
Thank you for the invitation.
Next to Pasha is Anastasiya Osipova, a wonderful translator and the editor of Cicada Press, a Brooklyn-based small publishing house, which I think has been around for about 5 years. And although we've had many book talks and events with Andrei Bely Press, a publishing house that should probably be familiar by now here, this is our first event with Cicada, and we hope not the last one. So Anastasiya will read Pasha's translations, I think her own and perhaps someone else's. The book that Pasha is presenting has a whole team of translators who work on these texts, and it is also available for sale if you'd like to get it after the reading. Another book is all right. Is it bilingual? Another bilingual edition by Cicada by fellow poet Roman Spinkin. Pasha can say a few words if you and we'll start with the reading, and then we'll need about half an hour questions and answers. Yeah, so let me stop here. Thanks again so much.
Thank you. Well, probably before we get to readings, we should say a few words about Pasha's work, hopefully with his own support. Maybe he'll move the microphone closer to you. Emma? So, I think before we introduce the volume, it's important to say a few words about the context. So, Pasha is in addition to being a poet in his own right, Pasha belongs to a very vibrant community of independent, avant-garde minded and sort of theoretically interested contemporary poets in St. Petersburg, mostly in Russia. He's also one of the helmsmen of Translit journal. Here we have an English edition, which is a kind of an alternative institution in its own right. Translit was conceived in around 2012, right? As at the time where the European Institute in St. Petersburg, which is sort of the main institution that grants PhDs that are recognized in the West and that's engaged in a kind of heavy intellectual traffic, has been sort of temporarily shut down for bogus reasons. So as a kind of response to this, Pasha and his colleagues and friends have founded so-called Free University. Street University, sorry.
Finally, 2008. I thought you meant
yeah.
a different thing.
Sorry, 2008. So they would meet on the streets and hold seminars, meetings, talks on subjects that were very important to them. And as a kind of paper outlet of those meetings, they developed Translit magazine was born, right? And then,
in a way.
Well, you can talk, speak yourself.
I would say boost. Not born, but boosted by this practice.
Right. And so Pavel's poetical practice is very closely interlinked with his interest in alternative academic and poetic institutions, right? That are that sort of anarchically spring from the initiative of the creators. And in some ways, his practice exists in a very close connection to the sort of the precedent of Russian, Soviet artistic organizations that were born after October Revolution, right? So when you're listening to the poems, it's a good idea to kind of to think about them as they interact with the legacy of Russian literature effect, the work of Russian formalists, and what else?
And everything.
And everything else. Okay. Do you want to add anything?
I don't know, maybe we can start and then some new questions will appear or some suggestions or
Great. Maybe why don't you read in Russian and I will read translation.
Okay. Even though it's not my idea of poetry that sound holds too much information and poems should be read only in native language, nevertheless, I will read it in Russian and switch to Russian from this moment, and master will read English. But I still keep some comments in English, not to translate them, not to make you to translate them. And I will start from the poem which was exactly read first time on the Street University session meeting. And exactly because of some special moment in history of this quasi-institution. Поэма солидарности о нашей разобщенности. Мы помним, мы храним верность 40 лет, как 40 дней. Возвращайтесь в аудитории. Они защищены от пожара. Из искры нет, не возгорится. Приняты все меры, более-менее искренне. На всякий пожарный следовало бы сигнализацию строить и в тело. Ведь пожар в одной голове всегда может перекинуться на другую. И тогда полыхнет весь город. Для этого-то и нужны качественная изоляция индивидов, системы пожарной тревоги, самый простой телефонный номер, также, вероятно, призваны напомнить об одиночестве и невозможности солидарности. Возвращайтесь в аудитории. Они защищены от шума и сырости. Они просто созданы для плодотворных исследований шума и сырости. Где, как ни в аудиториях, можно составить изотермы и шкалы шумов? Где, как ни в аудиториях, можно составить компетентное представление об этих феноменах? Возвращайтесь в аудитории. Они защищены от сумбура улицы, бесподобной архитектуры, модерн фасадом, защищены от всей этой глупости и надсады, от ежедневных убийств нацменов и от цен на нефть, колебаний, от брюзжаний бомжа и от дубинок режима, от всего этого централизованного постмодернизма. Только в аудиториях священное исследовательское негодование можно будет без утечки направить на подробное описание всех нарушений и попраний, состроить немой упрек системе, немой ничей, ведь все мы в сущности не так уж и негодуем, возвышая свой голос, лишь для немоты упрека, занимая руки экспертной фигой в кармане. Возвращайтесь в аудитории. Они защищены в том числе от подобного рода провокаций. В них всегда найдется мудрый модератор, ответственное лицо, чья широкая либеральная душа, и вы тоже его поймите, не сможет все же простереться до постановки вопроса о собственной легитимности. Вы не хотите играть в предковерные игры, но вы оставляете нетронутым сам ковер и оставляете возможность вызвать вас на него. Когда же вызовут, нечего сетовать. Возвращайтесь в аудиторию. И вправду, не май месяц.
So once again, this poem was first read in public at the streets of Street University in St. Petersburg in March 2008. A poem of solidarity and alienation. We remember, we remain faithful. 40 years like 40 days. Return to your classrooms. They're fireproof. No, a spark will not set them ablaze. All measures have been taken, more or less earnestly. In case of fire, we ought to install alarms in your bodies as well. For a fire in one head can always spread to another. Then the whole town will go up in flames. Hence the need for the qualitative isolation of individuals. A fire alarm system a simple 3-digit telephone number, probably also meant to remind us of our loneliness and the impossibility of solidarity. Return to your classrooms. They're noise-proof and humidity-free. They're made for fruitful investigations of noise and humidity. Where else but the classroom can we calculate isotherms and decibel scales? Where else but the classroom can we reach competent conclusions about such things? Return to your classrooms. The splendid Art Deco facade proves them against the confusion outside. They're proof against stupidity and vexation, the daily murders of ethnic minorities, fluctuations in the price of oil, the grumbling of homeless, the regime's truncheons, centralized postmodernism. Only in the classroom can the researcher's righteous indignation focus without fear of brain drain, without fear of leaks, on a thick description of all violations and abuses of rights, to send the system a silent reproach. It is not my reproach, it is no one's reproach, but none of us. Basically, it is all indignant. As we raise our voices merely to the muteness of reproach, keeping our hands busy with the overeducated fuck you in our pockets. Return to your classrooms. There are also proof against such provocations. In the classroom, you shall always find a wise moderator, a responsible party, whose generous liberal soul, you have to understand him too, would never go so far as to question its own legitimacy. You don't want to join the fighting under the carpet, but you leave the carpet itself intact, and the possibility you will be cold on it. When you're cold, there will be no reason to complain. Return to your classrooms. This is really not the month of May.
So, by the way, I think it's a good. It was a good poem to start here, not only mention St. Peter Street University, but in general, I should maybe say a few words about the book, which is entitled Reported Speech, and in a way it corresponds to the method, which I wouldn't explain, but which you will feel if it works. From the next poem, it could be already been more or less clear. Случай. Как-то раз Артем Александрович в неустановленное время, в неустановленном месте, умышленно, незаконно, без цели сбыта, для личного употребления, действуя умышленно, сознавая противоправный характер своих действий, приобрел у неустановленного лица за неустановленную сумму полиэтиленовый пакет с веществом растительного происхождения зеленого цвета, являющимся наркотическим средством марихуаны, общей массой сухого хрупкого вещества 11,0 грамма, что как раз является крупным размером. После чего, положив его в свою габаритную сумку, тем самым незаконно, умышленно, без цели сбыта, бережно храня при себе незаконно приобретенное наркотическое средство, Артем Александрович стал перемещаться по территории Дзержинского района города Новосибирска.
An incident. Once, Artyom Alexandrovich, in an unidentified time, in an unidentified place, willfully, illegally, without intent to distribute, for personal use only, acting willfully, conscious of the unlawful character of his actions, purchased from an unidentified person, for an unidentified sum, a plastic bag with a substance of organic origin, green, identified as the narcotic drug marijuana. The total mass of the dry brittle substance equaling 4 ounces, which is in fact exceeds the permitted amount. After which, having placed it in his oversized bag, thus illegally, willfully, without intent to distribute, tenderly safeguarding on his person the illegally purchased narcotic drug, Artyom Alexandrovich, victory of the Dzerzhinsky neighborhood in the city of Novosibirsk.
Next poem from the same side. Примечание переводчика. С эпиграфом. Связь между этими словами была, возможно, создана в другое время. Людвиг Wittgenstein. В Королевском колледже пожар. Не говори чепухи. Что является объектом твоего желания? Я хочу, чтобы в эту комнату вошел мистер Смит. Вы уверены, что это именно то, чего вы хотите? Конечно, я должен знать, чего я хочу. Не говори чепухи. Я хочу, чтобы произошло то-то и то-то. То, во что ты веришь, не является фактом. Я чувствую страх, я боюсь чего-то, но не знаю чего. Где бы ты ни был, ты должен добраться, откуда бы то ни было, к этому месту, из которого вышел. Почему ты полагаешь, что твоя зубная боль соотносится с фактом, что ты держишься за щеку? Безусловно, существуют совершенно определенные действия, представления того, что другой ощущает боль. Меня никогда не учили соотносить глубину воды под землей с ощущениями в моей руке, но когда я чувствую определенное напряжение в ней, слова Трифута сразу возникают в моем сознании. Ну, конечно, красное существует, и вы должны это видеть, если способны это представить. Увеличение давления на мои глаза продуцирует красные образы. В Королевском колледже пожар. Не говори чепухи. Я хочу, чтобы произошло то-то и то-то. Каким странным механизмом в таком случае должно быть наше желание, если мы можем желать того, что никогда не исполнится? Конечно, это не все, но ты можешь построить более сложные случаи, если хочешь. Мы же должны будем говорить ниже о значении выражения, забывания значения слова. Примечание переводчика. Этого никогда так и не было сделано.
Translator's note. The connection between the words and King's College was perhaps made at another time. It's a preface from Ludwig Wittgenstein's Intentionality. King's College is on fire. Don't blather. What's the object of your desire? I want Mr. Smith to come into the room. Are you sure this is what you want? I should know what I want, of course. Don't blather. I want this and that to happen. What you believe is not a fact. I feel afraid. I'm afraid of something, but I don't know what. Wherever you are, you must get from wherever you are to the place you left. Why do you think your toothache has something to do with your holding your cheek? Without a doubt, there are completely concrete acts representing the fact another feels pain. I was never taught to associate the depth of groundwater with sensations in my hand, but when I feel tension in it, the word 3 feet immediately comes to mind. Red exists, of course, and you must see it. If you can't imagine it, increasing pressure on my eyes produces red images. King's College is on fire. Don't blather. I want this and that to happen. What a strange thing our desire must be if we can wish for something that shall never come true. This is not the whole of it, of course. You can construct more complex cases if you like. Actually, we should discuss below the meaning of the phrase forgetting a word's meaning. Translator's note, it never happened, in fact.
Okay.
Yeah.
As you can see, I hope it's visible from the few last examples. It's not written by me, so there is no one word which was written by me, but it was somehow collected, grasped, or appropriated. That is why actually the book entitled Reported Speech, and sometimes I call this method creativity, which differs from our poetry in a way. If you have any questions, I guess we can let them be now. If no, we'll continue.
Perhaps for pedagogical reasons, we should maybe say a few words about Russian tradition of the literature effect and its influence on you.
It's a risk to transform reading into lecture, even though we are in the audience for having lectures and even there, everything for lecturing. But if you really interested, I don't know, you never answer. In Russian avant-garde and this small episode of late 20s and literature fight emerged. So yeah, it was sort of, I would say, Soviet avant-garde, not really Russian. So it was after revolution, and it was very special moment when some modernist tendencies were combined and hybridized even with realist or documentary. I guess idea of literature fact is still very relevant, though the notion of fact lived through some transformations, and especially today it is rather violated and permutated and everything. That is why I'm insisting on some method of transmitting or reporting speech of others with minimal changes, with minimal processing. I would say I would employ this technical term because I think rather long time poetry is not a matter of writing, but a sort of a technical skill, technical method with its own technical unconsciousness and literature fact and some other avant-garde techniques. And the very idea of literary technique was, I mean, in the time of formalism, were the first more or less conscient in that sense. Questions? Okay. Some slightly different method of reporting the speech. Expertise. На примере данного стихотворения мы снова увидим, как политические декларации, включенные в произведение искусства, распрямляют, упрощают и выводят произведение из эстетического пространства, переводят его в некую иную плоскость, так сказать. Мы увидим, что автор будет пытаться выразить свои политические взгляды и убеждения, неумело маскируя их эстетической формой. Объективные же качества последней, по мнению многих экспертов, непременно окажутся значительно ниже, чем если бы он занимался своим делом и просто писал стихи, ища свой стиль и свое место в литературном процессе. Если бы автор для начала несколько умерил свою спесь, почитал бы классиков, поучился бы на филологическом факультете, где, безусловно, умеют прививать к ним любовь, осознал бы всю несовместимость политики и искусства, и только потом уже попробовал бы сочинить что-то свое, желательно, конечно, в подражательном виде, тогда бы мы еще могли говорить здесь о поэзии. Но в данном случае мы не можем позволить себе говорить о поэзии. Мы увидим также, что автору придется признать прямо в тексте своего же стихотворения всю несостоятельность собственных претензий. Однако также мы сможем проследить и то, как он непременно попробует как-нибудь выкрутиться, прибегая к таким чуждым русской поэзии явлениям, как концептуализм, постмодернизм и прочее. Кроме того, мы увидим, что автор в данном стихотворении кощунственным образом выбирает основы русского села-ботанического стиха, заложенные такими великими людьми, как Ломоносов, Державин, Жуковский и, конечно же, Пушкин. Из чего мы сможем сделать вывод, что автор наверняка не может похвастаться истинно патриотическим отношением к великой 200-летней русской культуре, принимая во внимание все вышесказанное, а также то, что автор прибегает к использованию запрещенной символики, разжиганию ненависти по отношению к социальной группе власть и, наконец, был замечен на собраниях отдельных леворадикальных групп, мы можем заключить, что его жалкие эстетические отправления действительно содержат экстремистский компонент, а сам он может быть осужден по статье 280 Уголовного кодекса Российской Федерации «Публичный призыв к осуществлению экстремистской деятельности, совершенной с использованием средств массовой информации».
Forensic examination. This poem is yet another specimen of how inserting political declarations into works of art flattens and simplifies them, ejecting them from the aesthetic realm and transferring them to another dimension. We shall see the writer has attempted to voice his political views and convictions, clumsily camouflaging them as aesthetic window dressing. Its objective qualities, according to many experts, are surely much poorer than if he had minded his own business and simply written poems looking for his own style and his own place in the literary scene. To begin with, if the writer had toned down his arrogance, read the classic works, studied in the comparative literature department, where of course the love for such works is instilled, he would have realized art and politics are incompatible, and only then would have tried to write something of his own, preferably in an imitative vein. We might have been able to speak of poetry in this case. In this case, however, we cannot permit ourselves to speak of poetry. We shall see as well the writer had to admit, right in the poem itself, the bankruptcy of his own claims. However, we shall also be able to trace how he certainly tried to get away with it, resorting to such things alien to Russian poetry as conceptualism, postmodernism, and so on. In addition, we shall see the writer blasphemously trampled on the foundations of Russian syllabotonic verse as laid down by such great men as Lomonosov, Державин, Zhukovsky, and Pushkin, of course. In the poem, from which we can conclude the writer definitely cannot boast of a truly patriotic attitude towards Russia's magnificent 200-year-old culture. And considering all of the above, and the fact that the writer resorted to using banned symbols, inciting hatred towards the social group also known as the regime, and finally has been spotted at rallies of leftist radical groups, we can conclude his pitiful aesthetic exercises do indeed contain extremist content, and he can be convicted under Article 280 of the Russian Federal Criminal Code, public calls to extremist activities committed with the use of mass media.
Next cycle called Off Topic. And the sort of continuation section of meetings to ATD. Машины передают. Поэт умирает. Время идет. Несколько изображений, обозначающих реальных людей, многие из которых тоже считаются поэтами, начинают мелькать с репликами, с поспешными соболезнованиями. Их слова натянуты, неуместны, наконец, лживы. Их слова, передаваемые машинами после смерти поэта. Внезапно этот поток нулей и их визави обращается вспять. И выясняется, что это еще не конец, что у поэзии с небытием давние счеты и несписанные долги, в счет которых, возможно, и было допущено подобное возвращение. Выясняется, что машинам здесь остается нервно курить в ожидании, что они вообще не знают, как себя вести в такой ситуации, что они могут только топить в потоке слова, пока те не спустятся до состояния поэзии, то есть смерти коммуникации, что уже не удастся перевести в фоновый режим, в режим уже имевшего место оповещения, отключить это, настроить интерфейс удобнее. Только ради этого уже стоило выкинуть такой трюк на прощание. В конце концов, это просто-напросто старомодно, скажет самый наглый из неразлогинившихся поэтов. Смерть старомодна, поэзия будущего будет состоять из единиц и нулей. Она уже из них состоит. Старомодно присутствовать у адра, полностью быть в одном месте. Ведь в это время можно делать столько интересных вещей с машиной самого языка. Эти слова, передаваемые машинами, к сожалению, уже не будут иметь никакой связи.
Offline to ATV. The machines are transmitting, the poet is dying, time is passing. Several images depicting real people, several of whom are also considered poets, start to flicker with messages conveying hurried condolences. Their words are strained, inappropriate, and in the end, false. Their words transmitted by machines after the death of the poet. Suddenly, this torrent of zeros and their corresponding ones reverses course, and it turns out that it's not yet the end, that between poetry and oblivion there remain unsettled scores and unpaid debts, on account of which perhaps such return was made. It turns out that the machines will be left to smoke nervously in anticipation, that they don't at all know how to behave in such a situation, that they can only drown their words in the torrent until the words congeal into the state of poetry, that is, into the death of communication. That it won't be possible to turn on the background mode, to mark it as read, to turn off this option, to configure the interface to be more convenient. For this alone, it was worth pulling such a stunt in farewell. That when all said and done, it's just plain old-fashioned. The most impudent of the potentially logged-in poets will say, death is old-fashioned. The poetry of the future will consist of ones and zeros. It already consists of them. It is old-fashioned to be present at the deathbed, to be completely in one place. After all, you could be doing so many interesting things with the machine of language itself. Unfortunately, these words transmitted by machines will no longer have any connection.
From the same cycle, and coming back to the method of reporter speech. Без названия или сводки с полей. С конца 2005 года Марина Литвинович фактически прекратила быть политтехнологом и начала заниматься правозащитной и политической деятельностью. Министр экономического развития России Эльвира Набиуллина заплакала во время экстренного совещания премьер-министра Владимира Путина. На теракт в Домодедово российский фондовый рынок ответил снижением. В связи с продолжающимися работами по модернизации некоторые пользователи будут испытывать трудности с загрузкой отдельных страниц. Также в Роспотребнадзоре выразили обеспокоенность в связи с тем, что в последнее время в интернете все чаще создаются страницы, на которых размещается неоднозначная информация, которую трудно интерпретировать.
Reports from the field. Since the end of 2005, Marina Litvinovich essentially ceased being a political strategist and took up human rights and political activities. The Minister of Economic Development of Russia, Elvira Nabiullina, broke out in tears during the emergency meeting with Prime Minister Vladimir Putin. The Russian stock market plummeted in response to the terrorist act at the Domodedovo airport. Due to ongoing upgrades, some users will experience difficulties loading certain sites. Also, the Russian Bureau of Consumer Protection has expressed concern over the recent rise of websites containing ambiguous information which is difficult to interpret.
Next cycle from 2013, Poems for the Road. Ville de Paris. С адресацией Александру Пылькину. А вас что больше раздражает? То, что не в рифму, или то, что про Содом? Вот так, в год принятия жестких антигомосексуальных законов на родине, тогда называвшейся Российская Федерация, встретились два русских мальчика, случайно в Париже, но натуралы, общих знакомых, еще не подвергшихся тогда экстрадиции. При прощании заметались в замешательстве. Сколько раз нужно им целоваться? 3 раза на швейцарские манеры или 2 на остальное общеевропейские. Дернулись пару раз навстречу друг другу, но так и не поцеловались русские мальчики. Пожали друг другу руки, сохранили, так сказать, исконную идентичность.
Ville de Paris. What is it that irritates you more? That it doesn't rhyme or that it is about Sodom? That's the previous. And so, in the same year when the cruel anti-homosexual laws were passed in the motherland, then called the Russian Federation, 2 Russian boys met by chance in Paris. But they were straight. At the home of some mutual friends who had not yet been subjected to extradition. As they were parting, they flitted about in confusion, trying to decide how many times they should kiss. 3 times in the Swiss manner, or 2 like the rest of Europe. A couple jerky movements towards each other, but never actually kissed, the Russian boys. Shook hands, preserving, so to speak, their ancestral identity.
Называется «Оставайся, мальчик, с нами, будешь нашим PhD». Заграничные стажировки. Мы не в изгнании, мы в аспирантуре. Возвращают на место, усаживают за парту, возвращают имя по паспорту, с неотвратимостью разоблачают литературные псевдонимы, вновь поселяют в гетто высоких материй. Ты отдыхаешь тем же, чем ты работаешь. Слова оковыченным стилем, словно агенты полем. И только дни рождения остаются, чтобы помнить себя.
Stay with us, little boy, you'll be our PhD. Residences abroad. We're not in exile, we're in grad school. Put you back in your place, sit you down at your desk, restore to you your passport name, inevitably unmask your literary personas, once again make you a dweller in a ghetto of lofty abstractions. Your leisure is your work is your leisure. Style traps your words like agents in a field, in quotation, and only birthdays remain to remember yourself by.
And just a few small fragments in the end from the cycle called, as far as the literature department, I guess, comparative literature, poems on the history of literature. По просмотру Феррари. Антон Павлович крадет в жизни, ничего не меняет. Антон Павлович не испытывает трудностей с материалом. Он едет на Сахалин, потому что об этом никто еще не писал. Он в целом аполитичен, но убежден, что его исследование улучшит условия арестантов. Он приходит записывать их историю, как снимать показания с датчиков. Ему ставят стул, называют русским писателем, из опасений более строгого наказания приходится что-то рассказывать, истории действительно более жизни. Ему неприятно знать о шпицрутенах, вшах, но он чувствует, сколь свежий все это материал. Русский писатель — это зонд, запускаемый в общество. Говорят, на некоторых стадиях еще помогает. Погрузите читателя в скуку, не тревожьте эстетикой, и при должном уходе он быстро пойдет на кадры.
While watching Ferry. Anton Pavlovich borrows from life, changing nothing. Anton Pavlovich has no problem with new material. He goes to Sakhalin because no one has written about it. He is completely apolitical, but still convinced that his research will improve the lives of prisoners. He shows up and writes down their stories as though taking readings from a meter. He's brought a chair, declared a Russian writer. The fear of some harsher punishment impels them to share narratives of their lives, of the lives they once knew. He would rather not know about gauntlets, the lies, but it all makes for such fresh material. The Russian writer is a probe launched into society, they say, and sometimes he still serves a purpose. Plunge your reader into boredom, don't berate them with aesthetics, and with due care they will soon be marching off to jail.
From the next period of Russian literature, cycle titled «Берия как Аберию». Нам приходится констатировать, что произошла очередная вылазка очередных литературных хулиганов с целью установить заумную диктатуру в поэзии, прямо как в эти ваши 90-е. Просьба студенческой, рабочей, а значит и бдительной молодежи игнорировались. Все время пытались быть подальше от политики, как сказал поэт, от этой по-настоящему скучной стихии. Стремились забыться в самовлюбленном наслаждении, в своем диком поэтическом озорстве, оказываясь порой в полнейшей творческой прострации, но делая это горячо и искренне. Принимая пародию за новаторство и обрекая себя на бесплодие, на длительный творческий паралич. Их последними словами были наше заумное жонглерство, наша бессмысленная поэзия, наш уход от жизни. Это искусство чуждых людей, поэзия классового врага. Так говорю вам я, Лидия Лесная, в благословенном 27-м году.
From the series Beria as Aberiu. Let it be stated for the record that yet another offensive has been carried out by yet another group of literary troublemakers, with the goal of establishing a Zaum dictatorship in poetry, just as in the wild 90s, in defiance of requests from the youth, students and workers, presumably vigilant, all the time keeping their distance from politics, as one poet has said, that truly boring element, striving to lose themselves in the self-embracing joy of their wild poetic folly, and at times finding themselves in total creative frustration, but doing it ardently, honestly, mistaking parody for innovation, and condemning themselves to infertility, to ongoing creative paralysis. Their last words, our Zaum acrobatics, our meaningless poetry, our departure from life, this is the art of the hostile element, the poetry of the class enemy. So I say to you, Lydia Lesnaya, in the blessed year of 1927.
И, наверное, последний, да, тоже. Без названия. From the same cycle, poems in Russian literature. Вы ездили на картошку вместе с Иосифом Бродским. Вы помните количество мест в автобусе и поименно тех, кто их занимал. Вы учились с Гнисарецким, дружны были с Меламидом, Кабаковину прославляли. А мы ничего из себя не представляем. Мы ни в чем таком не участвовали, но обо всем таком знали и подробно читали, ведь, к несчастью, у нас уже был интернет. А если мы где-нибудь и бывали, то должны сначала были распечатать пресс-карту ХЖ, которую, в принципе, мы и писали, но это все равно казалось нам не по праву. О, как вас петь мне пресс-карты ХЖ! Сколько дверей вы открыли, плата за вход в которую уступила бы бутылке сухого. Так вот, мы не ездили на картошку, на ужасную, несвободную советскую картошку. Мы ездили на правозащитные семинары, Примерно туда же, в пригород Ленинграда, ездили на конференции студенческого протеста, чтобы оказаться в Киеве, в Париже, говорили о гендерной дисциплине и блюли солидарность уродов. В общем, нам тоже пришлось пережить немало, чтобы выбиться в люди, да выставиться хотя бы в люди. Вот только рассказывать мы об этом не будем.
You rode out to work on the potato farm, Trotsky. You can still remember every seat on the bus and everyone's name and who sat where. You started with Genesaretsky, made friends with Malamid, sang the praises of Kvakov. Us, on the other hand, we're worth nothing and have achieved basically nothing. Though we know all about you, of course, and have read every last detail, now that the internet unfortunately exists. If we ever were going somewhere, we would have to forge a Moscow art magazine Prasad. And I mean, we did write for them, but it still felt transgressive somehow. Oh, how can I sing of my fake Moscow art magazine press pass? How many doors did you open for me, where just the price of admission would have covered a couple of drinks at least? But so we did not go to the potato farm, the terrible, freedomless Soviet potato farm. Instead, we went to human rights seminars in basically those same fields outside Leningrad, attended conferences on student protest for an excuse to be in Kiev or in Paris. We talked gender studies and guarded the worker solidarity of robots. But really we went through an awful lot too, to get out there and become someone, or just to get our work shown at the Luda Gallery. It's just that we don't find ourselves with so very much to say about it.
Thank you. Questions? Yes.
So we have plenty of time to hear everything you wanted to know. We're afraid to ask.
Can you tell a little bit about the context of how this poetry is formed? I assume it's also collective, right? Because it's a number of people. If it's this informal street university. So what's happening there?
Well, thank you for the question. Maybe we should start it from Q&A session and not just say a few words. But in a way, Street University was one of the activity which somehow was parallel to some individual poetic practices of persons who were also organized and united by Translit magazine. But it doesn't mean that all poems were read publicly on the street first. So it was mentioned only concerning one poem, which was read first here. But of course it was important institutive, I don't know how to say it,
Institution.
It is, yeah, not actually institutional, but contra-institutional, but institutive moment.
Exactly.
Yeah, maybe. Where we realized that it is important not to wait for publication or for, magazine publication or, I don't know, for book publication or some critics or something, but it's necessary to do yourself. So in a way, if you want, it was some DIY initiation, so-called do-it-yourself movement. And the magazine which we were speaking in the beginning, it is still made by some group of same thinkers, some same ages in St. Petersburg, Moscow, Nizhny Novgorod, and so on, without any support from government or private funds. So it's independent, absolutely independent economically, and that is why independent politically and let's say ideologically from any any institutions which preceded. Yeah. So it was somehow parallel stories. I mean, there's political and activist practice on the streets, which ended more or less in 2012, because it was in a way dispersed in not branded everyday practices of Bolotnaya Ploshchad, Occupy movement, and so on. So I mean, it somehow embedded and dispersed in this very wide and not personalized protest movement, and ended with it. And the magazines continued to exist after, and in a way developed. So yeah, we tried to do it in some hierarchical ways. So there is a mailing list which coincides with editorial board. Each person published twice is invited, receiving an invitation to enter editorial board, and he has the same voice as me or other person who established the magazine. So it's a way, in a way, attempt to establish a community, not curatorial project, but community of same thinkers, same ages, or not actually now not only same ages, but in a way, of course, it is ideologically somehow united around some emancipatory practices and traditions. Yeah. And it's not only union of ideas, let's say, and so on, but also materially organized unity. So each of us going somewhere to university, to art gallery, to exhibition, to some city, takes something with him, some copies, some distributed, and so on. So I would call it cooperative, maybe. Yeah, some independent cooperative.
And the majority of people are still there, or like you live in Switzerland, right?
I'm living for two cities between Geneva and St. Petersburg, but because magazine needs, material artifact needs attention and care, not only by internet, but you need to go to printing house, transport the circulation, and yeah, of course, so it's impossible just via email. And then they have presentations, not only in St. Petersburg, but in some other regional centers in Russia and in nearest post-Soviet, and not only post-Soviet foreign countries, where none of us is actually writing. So there are some small groups, again, emerged, small groups, self-organized groups in Samara, Krasnodar, who are associating themselves with Translit and contributing as authors, but at the same time part of this technical infrastructure.
So I missed the beginning, but just to clarify, everything that was read today is not necessarily written by a single person at one time. It's a collective. It's a cooperative.
It was misread. No. I explained. I tried to explain. Maybe it was not that clear, even if you would be here in the very beginning. But I just mentioned that the book is entitled "Reported Speech," because actually most of texts are somehow appropriated and or delegated to some other sources or grasped from other sources. And my Russian book, from which few texts borrowed here, it contained print screens or photos of original sources. For example, few texts I read, I guess it was more or less clear. are taken from police report or some real arrest of activist who was arrested with some small amount of drug, but it was at the same time instrumentalized by officials to discredit him, and so maybe it wasn't enough for the case, for court case. The other text was taken from a book, for example, which I was just reading.
But you individually took it.
Yeah. There is some transcendental, small, let's say, nominal transcendental apparat remains. Yeah. But the idea is that there are too many texts now, and we need somehow to cope with that. And my idea is that maybe as an cited, quoted author in the epigraph, you need not to produce new synthetical proposition, but somehow cope with already existing. I mean, Wittgenstein. And I think there is too many texts around us in medias, in newspapers, in books, in audiences, in university, and even just on the streets. And that is why it's not poetry for me. It's not the question of how to produce some original thought or expression or something, but how to live in this milieu, in this context of some, let's say, informational overload. I guess this is the most remarkable the most remarkable feature of our time. When previously, in previous centuries, poems were written in albums or even published already in some books or magazines, it was absolutely different state of information and how it circulated. Now we live in a situation not of deficit but of proficit of texts, and that is why poetry, I don't know, do you feel it or not, but literature, poetry should somehow respond to this new situation, to this new condition. It couldn't remain the same as in 19th century, just because of absolutely quantitative parameter. You know? So it's not the question of my desire to change something in poetry. It's new condition in which we live, and that is why poems should be written differently when compared to the 19th century. That is the idea of reporting some speech, even though they are somehow frameworked, of course, reframed or just processed. Yeah, of course, it's not only one operation of transmitting. We are not naive, but there are some series of operations. I insist on some technical terminology of these operations. It's processing, mixing, transmitting, and so on.
Yeah. I was just wondering, what was the principle of the selection of the pieces? Like, why did you choose those particular pieces and the abundance of the text that you've seen around you?
Thank you. It's a very good question. I mean, as a question whether it is collective or not, here I should say, of course, here it remains some voluntarism, if you want, of choice of poet, as it was always. But previously, poet needed to be voluntary in more levels, on more levels. You know, he was to decide everything. And here now, I guess the gesture of poetry is somehow folding to the gesture of assigning something as poetry. So still you have some moment of fascination of some text, as maybe previously poets were facing with fascination of things, of nature, of feelings maybe. I guess facing with some texts could be poetical, including electronic text, including some trash text, including some not very well comprehended text. I could answer that this poem processed from Wittgenstein. So all the content of this poem is actually written by Wittgenstein. So my contribution, let's say, is in combining and processing and mixing some parts, which actually were clear for me when I was reading. So I would say that there were moments when I was somehow blind, or maybe so it was blind spots, which seemed to me poetical because of that. So it's not my aspiration of his writings or something. I would say it's blind spots of Wittgenstein. All the same with this police report or something. When I read them, they seemed to me that absurd and that poetical at the same time that I need to save them, somehow reframe them, to save from oblivion. So there is no privilege. It could be police report or just announcement on the bus stop or some book. It's not. It was also, for example, a book on Aberio. So it was real literary fiction, non-fiction book, which just seemed to me like. Sure, but it was some.
Oh, but just to build up.
Okay.
But correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems that there is a bit of a pattern in the choice of material. Very often it has to do with either being processed through an institution, right? There's kind of at least 3 poems that deal with some kind of forensic report or another, or a response to sort of being kind of you as a poet or kind of Francis being kind of inscribed into a canon or trying to position themselves vis-a-vis a literary tradition, which is another form of authority. And all those texts kind of perform a maneuver of sort of ironic slithering around it, either framing the kind of the speech of authority as an object to be kind of studied politically and therefore neutralized, or is it kind of as an irony to one's own self-seriousness. So there does seem to be a kind of an analytical focus on the institutional speech that also performs a kind of a gesture of subversion or derivative, if you like.
I think that first that there is some different level of irony in different genres of speech, and public speech is much more contaminated with possibility of irony itself. Then, of course, the speech of institution is it is more risky. Maybe it is more fragile. So when someone is speaking on behalf of the institution, it is already funny, It's already a sort of a contaminated with irony, and that is why most of sources are somehow, they trying to cope with the institutional speech. But aside this question of source, there is a question of operation, of different types of operation. Of course, they are not just reporting, you understand, but at the same time, different source combining with different types of processing give us a sort of a variety of methods. So there is a sort of a few, so not maybe plenty, but sometimes it's just one word added which change the intonation completely. Sometimes it's question of not adding something or borrowing or erasing something. Some poems existed as blackout also in some art form. But it's also a question of changing the order. Sometimes order being changed, change sense and so on. So it's a big discussion, but in general I would say, yeah, variety of source multiplied by variety of methods of processing speech. And maybe, yeah.
I have one more question.
Okay, I recall that I wanted to add something to your previous question,
Yeah.
but please.
It's just that you said that the criterion was, the main criteria was that it should feel poetic. And poetic, it should feel poetic in a way, and I really felt it, but maybe because you were reading it so. And can you define poetic for me? Because I got confused. Sorry.
I was sure that I would be asked to define poetic on comparative literature department. I was sure it's your work, not mine. But still,
The way you see it.
I don't know. I would say that I feel something in my hand, as in one text, that it seems to be poetic. I couldn't define it. I couldn't tell that there is some guaranteed parameters which produce poetry. Otherwise, it could be possible to construct an apparatus which will produce, which will read books and choose the most poetic parts and publish next books. No, of course it's always a decision of some, let's say, nominal transcendental apparatus, which is still embodied with subject, reading and writing. But the very contamination of reading and writing, it's not the new. I mean, already Sistonov from one novel by Konstantin Makharov was reading, and that is mean writing at the same time. So in a way, it's a sort of a meeting. It's a sort of a unprescribed, unprecedented meeting. But you feel when you're in that situation of feeling something poetic, you know, you recognize it. I mean, texts, of course. But answering to your previous question, or continuing to answer, I would say that there is some notion of production of contingency, maybe. How do you translate this in Chinese? Contingency. Yeah, which already again lead us to surrealism and to everything. But it is important to mediate this production of contingency by some method. And if I'm right, Peter Burger was the person who proposed this idea that just open production of contingency is not interesting. Yeah? It's just realism. It's important to mediate production of contingency by some method. And if the method is defined, whether it is literature fact or crazy maze or something, then the very material could be contingent. So maybe this is the answer, how it is defined. So it's somehow plugged in each other, method and material. And if you know how constructed your method, then you could use any material.
How would you define the difference from, say, Moscow conceptualism? Like Wittgenstein also used like extraneous speech. It's a reported speech, just of a different period. It's also deeply ironic because it's mostly like either ideological cliche or just unconsciously cliched speech over a certain period. How can you define the difference between your reported speech and that reported speech?
Thank you for question. I think about it sometimes, especially when we read together with Lev Simonovich. But I would say that already in conceptualism there was a sort of a décalage of method, and you know probably that Brigov insisted on some new sincerity, which will differ from this heavy, estranged concept, heavy, estranged concept. So he tried to produce inside the conceptualism some other method of estrangement, so saving some operation of estrangement, but at the same time including some sincerity. So I would say that what Lev Semyonovich does, it's the most obvious form, nominal form of conceptualism. And here you see probably even his nearest colleagues were somehow building and rebuilding this method. And of course we stand on the shoulders of giants, but I would say that every media epoch, every media technique changes something in our feelings, in our way of feeling something, and then in our sincerity, and of course in our way of processing textual material. So if this is cards, library cards, how to say, library cards, then we have situation of very static, very well paid, I guess, work, or at least paid. I don't want to say anything rude. I mean, it's some special sense of writing. So librarian is a person who is working somewhere with text. So he has no choice. He's always with text. My contact with text is much more precarious. I'm not working in library, and I'm not I'm not drowning in text. So in my case, it's sooner sense of occasional meeting with some really strange and sometimes trash text, as on internet. We didn't read the whole book, but sometimes it is some contextual advertisement which provokes me to make poetry. So in a way, it could be, I don't know, it could be some announcement on bus stop again. Yeah. So it's, I would say, I'm more open to different types of material, and it is in a way more risky because it destroys method or disturbs at least somehow, and at the same time the methodological base, as far as I can understand, is slightly different, and it is closer maybe to Brigov, because for me sincerity and idea to combine this estrangement of concept with some message is very important and very provoking.
I'd like to follow up. I don't know if Yulia thinks that the question is answered, but you said that the time is different now, and the time is not 19th century, but after 19th century we had 1.5 more centuries. And certainly conceptualists in Moscow, they created in a different political situation, and most of them were not heard for 25 years.
Till?
Most of them weren't heard, just by, it was a very small audience, let's say 100 people, 200 people, right?
Here is
and
even
then,
smaller.
Yes, right. But your audience in Russia, do you think it's bigger? This is one question. Another question is, if time changes, how do you see yourself different. This is what I want to follow up after you left.
Thank you. Yeah, I continue to answer you and try to
Right.
indicate how.
It was a very different political situation.
Yeah, that's for sure. That's for sure. I don't want to equalize it, but my idea was that different epochs means different technological epochs. You see, library cards or announcements for the citizens, yeah, обращение к гражданам, how to say, you know this series, biggest
Address.
yeah, address to citizens, some symptoms of analogical epoch, before digital, I mean, yeah. I mean, text in that technological epoch existed in slightly different way than they exist now. Of course, political context and sociological context, because I mentioned the part of writing set of writing, this employee of library. I don't mean Lev personally, but I mean it is somehow implied in cards. Yeah?